wouldn't be even considering this if it wasn't because we'll probably go out to bid for a bus contract later this spring. It's a possibility, which would be to move the time that the elementary and the MAC end the day, move it up 40 minutes to coincide, or an hour or so, we can adjust it by at least 40 minutes to allow the students to go home on the same bus as the 5 through 12 students. We would need more buses in the afternoon, less in the morning, so that'd be part of the change in the contract. But basically, students would not have art, music, PE. We'd have to find some way to provide them some PE services, although it wouldn't have to be as much as they get now. Not a pretty picture, but it could generate about $160,000. There are some classes that you could cut an additional teacher. Now you're driving class sizes to about 30, 31. If you were to do that, that's about, $225,000. Pre-K, right now we have 3 rooms. We could reduce that by 1 room. That's another $65,000. And those would be cuts that we could consider in order to supplement the budget to perhaps cover at least the salary increases and some of the improvements that we need. I mean, obviously going after class size would not allow us to decrease class size, but unless we came up with some alternative sources of income, that remains a possibility. Questions on the cuts?
That doesn't look good. That's the public schools that the town gets are what they pay for, and that's the reality. If the funding is low, really ugly, Mr. Larrabee.
I mentioned this last to the chair. I mentioned this last year, and I would hate to ever see it done, but I know there's been rumblings around town about it. And it would address some of these issues over here. Instead of cutting K and pre-K, moving them and closing the school without realizing any cost savings, administrative, heating, and everything else, janitorial.
It would. The only concern that I would have is, because we did look at that, it would combine some of these together. Mm-hmm. The problem is the elementary school does not have enough room to have K or pre-K over there. So it would include having some, perhaps 4th grade move to the middle school. It may still include reducing the number of pre-K classrooms, reducing kindergarten to half time so you can share the room morning and afternoon. That would be the only way to close. And my assumption is people have been talking about the MAC.
Yes. It's the only school you possibly think of.
Unfortunately, we don't have enough room in any of the schools to move wholesale grade levels from one school to the other. In fact, if you looked at the long-range capital plan, one of the situations that I considered is if we ever bring back the teachers that we cut, we're at the busting point at the elementary school where every little nook and cranny would be used. And we still would be sharing spaces amongst therapists and offices and you name it. So in the long-range plan, because of our programs, we need more space. At this point, we're saying we're okay in terms of space because we've cut teachers, so we have less classrooms in use. We have maybe one at the elementary, one at the MAC, and here at the high school it gets shared anyway, so there's really not a space that doesn't get used. There may be periods of the day that have empty rooms, but nothing on a regular basis. So I'm even thinking eventually we may need to expand the MAC to allow us to have all our programs in a space that's appropriate. So I would not recommend that, and that's why I didn't put it up here, because it includes, again, 2 of those cuts plus closing a building that we may need later on. If we get funding back in 2-3 years, or even this year, you know, maybe somebody will win the lottery and donate the proceeds. But if we were able to do it, we'll eventually need more space.
With the, and I'm sure Michael knows an awful lot more about this than I do, because I know he's mentioned it before. Would the elementary school qualify for any additional funding through the state to expand if the MAC wasn't there and we now would qualify that we had the need?
There's 2 issues to this. One, if we fix the roof using the money from the state, we've already promised the state that if we take on that, we're going to keep the MAC as a school. We're not going to close it. Partly because these projections as to how many rooms you will need for the programs you now have dictate that if we add the teachers back, we are going to need the MAC. However, just in walking around with the town building inspector and Mike Duarte, our director of facilities, there is very little room to expand over at the elementary school. I mean, as it is, if you've been up there, now that the snow's on the, well, some of it's melted, but a few days ago, you could hardly get in and out of there when the buses came. There's no place to park. There's no enough place now. If you expand the footprint of the building, you'd have no place at all. You'd have to put a gate down at the bottom of the hill and say, that's it. No parents can drive up to the elementary school, maybe just the staff. So we don't have the room at the elementary school for expansion. And apparently a few years back, somebody went in and looked at the way the building was built, because somebody said, well, you can go up. The building's not built in that way. It won't support a second story. So that's not even a possibility at the elementary school.
I just want to throw it there because it is.
Well, I figured this is the time to put it out there in case other people have questions. Send them in. We'll try to answer them. But some of them have already been at least researched enough that we can say it's not a direction that I would suggest we go in.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I just wondered, is this list in our packet?
No, I actually generated some of these yesterday and today, trying to do some research.
And you get copies of this to us?
I think I made some. Actually, I forgot to hand them out, sorry.
So my understanding is that we have a deficit, if we met our additional needs, of $204,000 with the scenario presented. Just wondering the total on this page. The total on this page is.
Oh, I didn't even try to total the page.
These are multiple options.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And thank you.
There's still another part to this.
I'll cross most of them out off my list, but
because you don't like any of them, I don't either.
so it's.